This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
You're watching China Global Television Network, and this is The World Today. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi, and these are your top stories. Joe Biden and Russia's Vladimir Putin to discuss Ukraine tensions. China says Washington's diplomatic boycott will not impact the success of the Beijing Winter Olympics. And South African President Ramaphosa criticizes Western countries for their handling of the Omicron variant. We start today's program in Beijing, where China's top party leaders have met to discuss next year's economic forecast. Chinese President Xi Jinping, who is also General Secretary of the Communist Party, chaired the meeting. Wang Haiyang has the details.
The key principle is maintaining stability while pursuing progress. Leaders also said actions will be taken to keep major economic indicators within an appropriate range and maintain social stability. They agreed to take a prudent and effective macro policy, continue to adopt proactive fiscal policies and prudent monetary policies. They said fiscal policies should be more effective with a focus on precision and sustainability, while monetary policies should be flexible and moderate, and the liquidity should be maintained at a reasonable and ample level. The meeting stressed the importance of expanding domestic demand and consumption. The leaders agreed micro policies should stimulate the vitality of market entities, and the protection of intellectual property rights should be strengthened. Structural policy should aim to smooth the national economic cycle, improve the core competitiveness of manufacturing, and enhance the resilience of the supply chain. Efforts should be made to advance affordable housing, support the commercial housing market to better cater to the reasonable demand of home buyers, and boost the healthy development and virtuous cycle of the real estate sector. The meeting underlined continued efforts to make breakthroughs in core technology bottlenecks and enhance the country's strategic sci-tech strength. The meeting urged efforts to ensure the bottom line of people's livelihoods, fully implement the employment-first policy, and promote the new third childbirth policy. It also stressed that China must expand its high-level opening up. Wang Haiyang, CGTN.
Meanwhile, China is blasting Washington's diplomatic boycott of next year's Beijing Winter Olympics, calling it pretentious and political manipulation. China's embassy says no invitations had been extended to American officials. It says the boycott goes against the Olympic spirit, but will not affect the Games in any way. The Chinese mission to the United Nations calls the move a self-directed political farce. It's accusing the U.S. of politicizing sports and provoking confrontation in a way that is doomed to fail. Washington on Monday said it would not send officials to February's Olympics over claims of human rights abuses, but American athletes will still compete. Beijing has since threatened countermeasures. Well, Christopher Nixon Cox, the grandson of former U.S. President Richard Nixon, has called for a conversation between the two powers to ease tensions. Meanwhile, Neil Bush, a son of former U.S. President George H.W. Bush, told CGTN that politics should not interfere with the Olympics.
I think that it's always better to continue the conversation, and I think that it's much better that our diplomats continue discussing whatever issues there are, because without discussion, without conversation, we can't come up with solutions.
These athletes have been training for years, and they're training in a sport that they've chosen to become the best at. And to prove that they're the best, they've got to go to an Olympics to be able to do it. And politics honestly shouldn't interfere. We can express as Americans our values, and that's fine, but hopefully we're not going to do something that keeps these athletes from all over the world from convening so that the athletes can enjoy. And once they're there, you know, athletics doesn't know, you know, political hardship really. It shouldn't. And I'm convinced that, you know, that experience is going to help bring us to a better understanding and hopefully, you know, tear down some of these walls of or barriers of you know, disagreement and concern, let's put it that way, from our side towards the Chinese. We'll see.
Well, let's bring you some analysis now of these developments. And we're joined by Professor Grant Javi from the University of Edinburgh, where he is the chair of sport. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor. China's response to the US's diplomatic boycotts has been to say that American politicians are not invited to the event anyway, and that the boycott will have no impact on the Games itself. So what then is the point of a diplomatic boycott, and what can it achieve?
Well, it's a very good question, and allegedly what this illustrates is just the fantastic scale and reach that sport has to carry messages, and whereas allegedly the diplomats and the politicians may not have been invited, the athletes certainly have been invited, and the athletes, according to the US government, are still going to the Winter Olympics. So it's not as if this is a full boycott. This seems to be a half boycott. And of course it's not new, but what it illustrates is the phenomenal scale and reach and connectivity that sport offers, and it carries messages both good and bad.
Indeed, Professor, but some might say that politics and sport simply should not be intertwined. What is your view then on the politicization of sports, especially on the global arena?
So for me, this is not a question of keep politics out of sport. You can't stop the politicization of sport. I'm not sure you want to. Sport has always been political, and it has done many, many good things as well as some more controversial things. But what this half boycott does is amplify the fact that sport is a great pillar of connectivity. It has scale that few other areas of public life offer, and therefore why would governments and sporting governing bodies and non-governmental bodies not use it to get messages across? It is an invaluable space that does a lot of good, simply because of its scale and reach, but it carries all sorts of messages. And this is just another example of that.
Indeed it is. Thank you so much for your time. That's Professor Grant Javi from the University of Edinburgh. Right, another news now. Israel has reportedly launched airstrikes in Syria. Syrian state media say Israel fired several missiles early this morning, targeting a port's container yard, which ignited several fires. No injuries have been reported. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes on Syrian territory, saying it will not allow the country to become a launch pad for attacks by Iran. And to the latest on the coronavirus, South Africa is preparing hospitals to accept more patients as the Omicron variant drives a fourth wave of infections in the country. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the variant appears to be dominating new cases in most of the country, and he's urged more people to get vaccinated. He says more restrictions may be imposed. Omicron was first detected in southern Africa last month, triggering global alarm. But scientists say it's not yet clear if it is more contagious or harmful compared to other variants. Well, the presidents of Senegal and South Africa have condemned the isolation of southern African countries from the rest of the world following the discovery of the Omicron variant. Since South Africa made the announcement that it had found cases of the new variant, numerous countries rushed to impose travel restrictions against it and its neighbors. Well, the presidents of America and Russia are expected to hold virtual talks today amid growing tensions at the Ukrainian border. Nathan King has more.
The stakes are pretty high for this virtual call scheduled for Tuesday here in Washington between President Vladimir Putin and US President Biden. The Ukraine tensions are really going to be focused. The US has accused Russia of potentially planning a military intervention, massing troops on the border with Ukraine and increasingly logistics to back them up as well. Russia's dismissed this, but we had a background call from a senior White House official today, and I want to let you know what they said. They said they don't know whether President Putin has chosen whether to military intervene. Consistent, however, they say, the intelligence for preparations for military action, and they said there will be very real costs if Russia does proceed, and also highlighted, though, that there won't necessarily be military costs right away, but focusing on a diplomatic process with a lot of economic sanctions, saying intense discussions with European allies on coordinated sanctions. There will be significant, severe sanctions, genuine and enduring and meaningful costs for Russia if they go forward. Let's have a listen to the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
It's not about threats. It's about conveying that the right path forward here is through diplomacy. In the meantime, on financial sanctions, we've consulted significantly with our allies and believe we have a path forward that would impose significant and severe harm on the Russian economy.
However, we do understand from the White House that if Russia did move into Ukrainian territory, then there would be an immediate response from the US in terms of putting more troops in NATO-aligned countries in Eastern Europe. We're thinking of Poland, etc. Russia really does suspect that Ukraine is drifting towards some sort of NATO membership or an ad hoc an agreement, which they would vigorously resist.
There are tensions around Ukraine, NATO's expansion toward our borders, the initiative of President Putin about safety guarantees. All these themes will be discussed.
Other items on the agenda, of course, will be Iran, weapons control, which is one area in which the US and Russia have cooperated in this administration. Of course, other areas like the DPRK, but really this Ukraine crisis overshadowing a lot of what's going to happen at this summit. The US president has let it be known for his staff that he's going to be frank with Vladimir Putin. No tweets or finger wagging, as they put it, but just a cool, calm and collected statement of US and US allies' interests. We'll wait and see. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
Well, that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan vows to continue anti-coup protests. Ethiopia says it has recaptured key towns from the Tigray People's Liberation Front. And South African President Ramaphosa criticizes Western countries for their handling of the Omicron variant. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also ahead in the program. In business, MTN shares up 3% after listing in Uganda. And in sports, Tunisia reached the last 8 after a 1-0 win over the United Arab Emirates. Right, in our top story, Ethiopia says it has recaptured key towns from the Tigray People's Liberation Front. The government said on Monday it retook Dessie and Kombolcha, along with several other towns on the Eastern Front. These are the latest victories by troops loyal to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. TPLF forces first seized the 2 towns in the Amhara region at the end of October and then threatened to march onto the capital Addis Ababa. The year-long conflict has killed thousands and triggered a humanitarian disaster in northern Ethiopia. Let's bring you the latest now. We're joined by CGTN's Girum Chala live in Addis. Girum, what is the latest from the battlefront?
Lindy, as you've said, since the Prime Minister went to the war front perhaps more than 10 days ago, the victories that the Ethiopian National Defense Force have registered and the government confirmed are one of the biggest. The cities of Kombolcha, Dessie, Bati, Kamise, very strategic military locations are now back in the hands of the National Force. And this victory has been also confirmed by the Prime Minister himself, calling it one of the greatest victories in the quest of freeing the Amhara regional state from the hold of the TPLF force. As you know, the Afar regional state is already free and there is no ongoing active war at the moment in that regional state. On the other hand, we should know that the TPLF time and again is releasing statements saying that these areas were strategically freed by our own force. We have left the areas for strategic purposes. But all in all, we can confirm that war now has continued, but this time around the Ethiopian National Defense Force are pushing to the town of Wolde, the last stronghold.
Well, thank you so much for that update. That is Girum Chala live for us there in Addis Ababa. Let's turn to the latest now in Sudan. Thousands of protesters once again marched on the capital Khartoum and other cities to protest against continued military rule. The protesters are opposed to the Sudanese army's decision to dissolve the Sovereign Council and the Council of Ministers. They're also opposed to the political agreement signed between reinstated Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and the military leadership. Hamdok had earlier assured the public that the agreement signed will lead to the freeing of political detainees and development aid. Well, as we know now, the trial of former President Omar al-Bashir resumes today in a court in the capital Khartoum under tight security. Let's bring you some analysis on this. We are joined by Thembisa Fakude, a senior research fellow at Africa-Asia Dialogues, joins us via Zoom from Johannesburg. Thembisa, former President Bashir certainly faces a number of legal challenges, both nationally, locally and internationally, but many of these are yet to be concluded. Talk us through why there have been so many significant delays to the legal process and what the implications of this might be.
Well, I think the delay has got a lot to do with the political problems that Sudan is finding itself at the moment, particularly with the coup and the reinstatement of Abdallah Hamdok, which happened after that attempted coup in inverted commas. So it's got a lot to do with that. But I think the other important thing is the list of the people that are supposed to be taken to the ICC. We are not sure yet who's going to be on that list. But I am of the view that the previous atrocities in Sudan were perpetrated by, amongst others, the two main leaders of the current Sovereign Council, that is Mr. Hemeti or Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, and the current general who's leading the Sovereign Council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan. So it's going to be very difficult to confirm a list without those two very prominent members who served with al-Bashir in the previous regime in that country.
Indeed, of course, this trial is about the 1989 coup. Bashir being tried for a coup that he led really over 30 years ago by an administration that is effectively a military government that's taking power from a civilian-led one. Would you say that it's a case of history repeating itself in Sudan?
Well, Sudan, as you know, is historically had all these kind of problems, but indeed, this is the history repeating itself. But I think what they will find more difficult this time around with the persecution of al-Bashir is how are they going to deal with Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who used to be the deputy of al-Bashir all the years. One will argue that you can't persecute Bashir without including Burhan. Secondly, how are they going to deal with the strong man, which is Hemeti or Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who is still accused of the atrocities in Darfur, for example, under the Janjaweed, which is the paramilitary army that he controls. So it's going to be a very difficult one, and it will certainly be unfair to the eyes of the Sudanese one and to the eyes of the world if they continue with the persecution of al-Bashir without taking into consideration or also indicting those two prominent individuals at the moment in the Sudanese politics.
Indeed, a complex legal process set to get underway, particularly if justice is truly to be served. Thank you so much for those comments. Tembi Sefagude joining us there via Zoom in Johannesburg. Now, in Madagascar, a trial of suspects allegedly involved in the attempted assassination of President Andry Rajoelina has begun. 20 people, including 2 Frenchmen, are being prosecuted for the alleged criminal act. Charges range from compromising state security to planning to kill the head of state. The hearings are expected to last up to 4 days. Some of the accused have been put under legal supervision, while others, including the 2 French nationals, are in prison. Now, turning to Gambia, the main opposition candidate in the country's recent elections has vowed to go to court to contest the outcome of the polls. Opposition candidate Usainu Darboe says he will commence legal proceedings and has urged his supporters to remain calm in the meantime. President Adama Barrow won a second term in office with thousands of his supporters celebrating in the streets of Banjul on Monday. Barrow's assumption of the presidency 5 years ago ended more than 20 years of dictatorship under Yahya Jammeh. Barrow has called on his supporters to respect those who voted for his opponents.
Now we are going through the elections. We are not happy with the results. But not being happy with the result doesn't mean that we have to adopt measures that run contrary to the law. The laws of the Gambia have provided us the remedies that we could avail ourselves. And those remedies we must pursue. After all, we are collecting the evidence, and at the end of the day, if our lawyers advise us that there is case to present in court, we will present the case in court.
Now, China and Sierra Leone have pledged to boost bilateral cooperation in various fields. Sierra Leonean President Julius Maada Bio met with senior Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi in the capital Freetown on Monday. Yang expressed China's willingness to further strengthen cooperation with the African country. Yang said Chinese President Xi Jinping and President Bio have held a phone conversation and exchanged messages of congratulations on the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries. Bio congratulated China for setting an example to developing countries as a contributor to global peace and development. The president stated that Sierra Leone firmly upholds the One China principle and supports the Beijing 2022 Olympic Winter Games. Right, you are watching Africa Live. Time now for a short break. Still ahead, South African President Ramaphosa criticizes Western countries for their response to the Omicron variant.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. We start in South Africa now. The country is preparing hospitals to accept more patients as the Omicron variant drives a fourth wave of coronavirus infections. President Cyril Ramaphosa says the variant appears to be dominating new cases in most of the country and has urged more people to get vaccinated. He says more restrictions may be imposed. Omicron was first detected in southern Africa last month, triggering global alarm. But scientists say it's not yet clear if it is more contagious or harmful compared to other variants. Well, the presidents of Senegal and South Africa have condemned the isolation of southern African countries from the rest of the world following the discovery of the Omicron variant. Since South Africa made the announcement that it had found cases of the new variant, numerous countries rushed to impose travel restrictions against it and its neighbors.
Isolating a country that has detected a new variant and has been transparent is not only discriminatory but also counterproductive because it encourages others not to publish the actual results of the investigations. That is the danger. We must continue to work together in solidarity. This pandemic, which is affecting all our countries, must bring us together on the side of solidarity in our response instead of adding a new divide between rich and poor countries.
Entre pays riches et pays pauvres. When South African scientists discovered, as President Macky Sall was saying, Omicron, the new variant, they immediately took on the responsibility of informing the world, the entire world, that a new variant has come through. And what is the result? The northern countries impose a ban to punish the excellence that comes from Africa. They basically say, we will not allow you to travel around. But lo and behold, Omicron is spreading all over the world.
Now, data from the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change shows that about 40% of vaccines that have arrived on the African continent have not been used. African nations are facing a number of challenges in getting people vaccinated, despite an increase in the number of vaccines available. CGTN's Joy Kirukijuma explains.
This is Sekenani Health Clinic in Narok County of rural Kenya. A group of villagers have come for their COVID-19 shot.
But while we were still standing there, we were told that the vaccine was over. So I was discharged and was not interested in following it up again.
For some, it meant a long and wasted journey on foot and a day away from their cuddle hearts. Yet Narok County, where the clinic is located, was not short of vaccines. 115 kilometers to the nearest town, 14,000 doses were sitting in a fridge. A mix-up with county officials meant Sekenani did not get enough vaccines.
Our cool box, which is basically, this is where we store our vaccine temporarily during our vaccination days. So instead of carrying out the vaccination directly from the fridge, we have our ice packs here. We usually keep them in the fridge, and when they require the requisite temperature, we are able to stock them here, and to make sure that the vaccine is cool, and then we do the vaccination from here.
A key difficulty in administering the vaccines is community skepticism. But some residents feel they could be persuaded to get inoculated if someone came to explain in person.
I would like to get it, but there is no public sensitization on why we should get vaccinated. No one came here. We only hear that people got vaccinated. We don't know why. We only hear there is a disease.
Health experts say successful vaccination campaigns in Africa are vital in ending the pandemic globally. For the large part, Kenya has ramped up its vaccine rollout. The health ministry has employed the use of social media, television and radio adverts to promote vaccines.
The campaign is actually bearing fruit. We used to do on average 60 to 70,000 vaccinations. Now we are doing more than 100,000. If we do 100,000 vaccinations for the next 30 days, then we are confident we are going to achieve the 10 million target.
The World Health Organization says only 102 million people, that is 7.2% of a population of 1.2 billion in Africa, are fully vaccinated. This, they warn, creates vaccine inequity, which is likely to prolong the pandemic. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has announced the reinforcement of measures aimed at slowing the spread of COVID-19. The measures include the compulsory wearing of masks, social distancing, and a strict curfew. They're aimed at limiting the importation of the Omicron variant that has been detected in at least 4 African countries so far. CGTN's Chris Ochamrenga has more from Kinshasa.
The DRC has stepped up measures to control the spread of COVID-19. The country's COVID-19 National Task Force has announced the compulsory wearing of masks, hand washing, and limited public gatherings to 50 people. The announcement comes barely 2 weeks after scientists detected the Omicron variant in South Africa. The DRC Health Ministry has not detected the variant in the country, but some people are happy that the government plans to protect them.
I think the government's health measures are a good idea because they're intended to protect us from the disease. If we follow them, we will be preventing deaths in our country.
Those regulations are not bad because they will help protect us from COVID-19. The president must have good reasons for introducing them at this moment. We just have to respect them.
Some health workers say the government's reinforcement of health regulations should be accompanied by payment of wages for those in the sector.
It's a good move, but the government should also pay health workers their allowances to motivate them to work.
Congolese authorities have recorded more than 1,100 COVID-19 deaths since March 2020. They've also recorded a slight increase in case numbers in the capital city.
The health guidelines aimed at preventing the spread of COVID-19 in the DRC have proved difficult to enforce, especially in the capital Kinshasa, because many people have long neglected mask wearing and hand washing in public places.
Vaccine hesitancy and misinformation is still widespread, despite efforts by the government and international organizations to counter it. And that has ranked the DRC among the least vaccinated countries in the world. According to the World Health Organization, only 56,000 people have been fully vaccinated out of its population of 90 million. The government plans to deploy the police to enforce the latest health measures in a bid to curb the spread of the disease and stop the importation of the Omicron variant. Chris Ochamrenga, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, in other news, Tanzania's 60-year independence anniversary was the central theme of the 14th edition of Swahili Fashion Week, held in the country's commercial capital of Dar es Salaam. The 3-day extravaganza brought together fashion and accessory designers from the East and Central Africa region and beyond. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
For the last 14 of Tanzania's 60 years of independence, the Swahili Fashion Week has strived to be the center of African fashion. This year, 92 designers from Swahili-speaking countries and beyond are showcasing their talent. Organizers argue the COVID-19 pandemic has allowed the event to become the largest fashion show in Africa.
There are virtual events, but with limited number of designers, showcases in other countries from 5 days to 2 days. So that's why this gave us an opportunity to become the biggest because of COVID, because we did not have lockdown.
At this event, 64 local designers, 10 emerging designers and 18 foreign ones are showcasing and marketing their work. Many of them believe the event is critical for their growth as designers.
It's really good and important for designers to have an opportunity to showcase their work in a professional setting, because then they get to hone and fine-tune their work and to sort of step back and see it outside of themselves.
Top designers in different categories are also being awarded for their work. Organizers will help advance their careers and help translate their art into incomes. Designers from the US, Oman, Spain and Italy are joining designers from East and Central Africa in showcasing their work for an international audience. Those in attendance at the event say they see the show's impact.
Colors, how you mix in special designers, we don't don't fear to experiment with combinations of colors. You know, we don't follow like strictly rules of fashion industry.
This show opens up the world for models and designers because it's the big show that's watched all over Africa. It becomes easier. If you have something nice, it's the place to sell it. It's a show that really helps even those who are starting off today.
Despite the strides made over many years, organizers feel more needs to be done to gain the kind of international recognition they desire. They hope that with each year of staging the show, they get closer to making African fashion truly global. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Well, let's take a short break now. Your business news up next. MTN shares up 3% after listing in Uganda despite an undersubscription. And 2 out of every 3 young people in South Africa are unemployed. We take a look at what these stats mean for the country.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
In your business news, Uganda's largest mobile telecom operator, MTN, has officially listed on the country's securities exchange. Though the offer was undersubscribed, attracting only 60% of the targeted value, shares were off to a positive start, closing the day 2.5% stronger. The IPO attracted more than 20,000 local investors in the telecom company, which is a unit of South Africa's MTN Group. CGTN's Michael Baleke reports.
Yes. Congratulations. MTN Uganda's first day of trading. The company's shares went up by 2.5%, trading at 205 Uganda shillings per share at the opening. MTN says the listing on the stock exchange is a strategy by the group to drive local ownership in the markets within which they operate.
MTN Uganda has fulfilled the objectives of the national broadband policy. We have increased our Ugandan ownership from previously less than 4% of the company to now, today, more than 15% of MTN Uganda is owned by Ugandans.
The listing reduces the ownership of MTN Group in MTN Uganda from 96% to 83%. This aligns with the Uganda Communications Commission's new licensing requirements for telecom firms with the national operator's license to list at least 20% of their shares.
This is a big deal for the government and the people of Uganda. With this transaction,
Ugandans now have a stake in one of the notable growth sectors in the country.
More than 21,000 people applied and bought the shares, and 87% of the shares were allocated to Ugandan investors. The MTN Uganda listing has more than doubled the market value of Uganda's securities exchange from $1.1 billion to $2.3 billion. The listing has also increased the number of trading accounts on the stock exchange from 38,000 to over 100,000. The Capital Markets Authority says this growth has made Uganda attractive to more offshore investors.
The categorization of Uganda as a frontier market will go a long way in attracting foreign capital to Uganda, especially from the global fund managers that only invest in markets that have a categorization.
Results from the MTN IPO show the initial public offering was undersubscribed, with MTN only securing around 60% of its target amount, raising $150 million. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, in South Africa, youth unemployment sits at a staggering 66.5%. This is the official unemployment rate for youth aged between 15 and 24. Unofficially, the figure is estimated to be over 70%. Even with tertiary education, young people ready to enter the workplace are battling to find jobs. According to Statistics South Africa, a further 500,000 people in the country were discouraged and stopped looking for work in the last 3 months. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more details.
The prospects are bleak for young people trying to find work in South Africa. Shanae Kader is 23 years old. She completed her second degree in 2020 and is still struggling to find a job.
I studied psychology at Wits University and I had finished my second degree last year. I actually have been looking for a job since before I finished my undergrad, which was about 2 years ago. So when I was in my final year of my undergrad degree, I started looking for jobs in case I don't get into honors. So I've been searching and it's hard because you need experience.
Despite several attempts and ambitious plans to create jobs, there's been little success. South Africa's unemployment rate is at a new record of 34.9%. Some experts believe education is not in line with the workplace, while some feel the poor state of the economy is to blame.
The kind of higher education degrees that South Africa produces do not necessarily meet the demand of the labor market or what the kind of jobs that are out there. In other words, graduates study, young people go to institutions of higher education to study, get their qualifications, but cannot find jobs.
According to the stats, 554,000 people stopped looking for employment in the third quarter of this year. This brings the total to 3.9 million people that are discouraged job seekers.
These days when you need to look for maybe a junior role in anything that you've studied and anything you've done, they want 3 to 5 years experience. And how do you expect that from someone who's fresh out of school or just basically been studying for the past 3 to 5 years? And it's really hard because you start growing in this world, you need to be financially stable, you can't basically do anything. Whether you have a small job, it's not enough.
While unemployment is up 10% since 2011, the rate rose almost 5% alone since January 2020 when COVID started.
I came into this year being very hopeful and it was such a letdown because with COVID, it's always ups and downs, push and pull. You don't know what to experience, you don't know what to expect. Look at now, we have a new variant and it's just very difficult, especially from an unemployed graduate perspective, because when I was in undergrad, I had searched for jobs and there was steady things, applications open, and then in less than 2 months, it all closed. Instead of people looking for jobs, they were getting rid of people in their companies.
The efforts to create jobs in the last decade have shown little success. Some experts believe it's time for a complete overhaul in strategy. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt's Ministry of Health has set up vaccination booths in some of the city's malls to boost its coronavirus vaccination rates. This amid rising fears of the spread of the new Omicron variant. The country has not yet detected any cases of the new variant, and health authorities say necessary measures must be taken to monitor the situation across the country. Egypt, though, has suspended direct flights to and from South Africa. The country has also announced it will activate a plan to offer COVID-19 vaccine booster shots to senior citizens, people with chronic diseases and healthcare workers. The government has set a target of vaccinating 40% of Egypt's population of just over 100 million by the end of this year.
It'll make Egypt a lot more safer because, for example, other countries who aren't getting vaccinated yet, they will have a lot more cases, which will eventually lead to a lot more deaths. But I think it's important that Egypt, gets vaccinated, and so everyone will be safe, so it becomes a safer place.
There are many people who have been vaccinated, which makes symptoms a lot less. All of us should get vaccinated. We have to see the world around us, and it is a necessary step. It is just like any other vaccine.
The Central Bank of Tanzania is planning to introduce a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, after several countries on the continent announced similar initiatives. Now, if successful, Tanzania will be among a growing list of countries currently exploring the rollout of digital currencies. CGTN's Isaac Lukando has more.
Tanzania's currency, the shilling, has been coin and paper-based since 1966. Following in the footsteps of Nigeria, Tanzania could soon have a digital version of its currency that will operate alongside the physical one.
The Central Bank of Tanzania has already begun preparations for the possibility of having its own digital currency. The preparations involve building the capacity of experts, increasing awareness of stakeholders, and researching.
With a growing number of Tanzanians trading in cryptocurrencies, along with the government's desire to embrace them, experts believe the introduction of a digital currency will help the government answer critical questions on cryptocurrency.
How to regulate cryptocurrency, how to deal with the technology, how to help even those guys who are trading cryptocurrency, even startups in Tanzania based on blockchain. How are they going to help them?
According to the International Monetary Fund, there are some 110 countries that are at some stage of developing their own digital currency. At least 7 countries, including Nigeria, have already launched theirs. With $7.8 billion worth of mobile money transactions monthly, the central bank sees digital currency as a natural evolution in its quest to embrace an increasingly digital world. It believes that having a digital currency will not only allow more Tanzanians to access financial services, but will also be cost-effective and will allow for easier tracking. Despite the benefits, experts warn that millions of digitally illiterate citizens could hinder the success of the currency.
A lot of people in Tanzania, particularly, they have got no access of internet. And you can see that this technology need internet, need some sort of skills, need guys who are somehow literate. So you can see that it is a challenge.
It is not clear when a rollout of the digital currency can be expected, but if all works out, using a digital currency could be a new normal for Tanzanians in the not-too-distant future. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And coming up in your sports. Tunisia reached the Arab